BBC Look North's Colin Briggs is your chairman for parts 2 and 3, but the evening gets underway with Radio Northumberland's Jonny Hall asking, the environment, is fracking good for the UK?
Can I have those notes? Yeah, as you might not have noticed, I'm not Colin Briggs, but hopefully the man himself will jump in at some point. But I'm Jonny, and apparently I'm going to be your host for this evening, so welcome to Question Time. For those that don't know, the format, we're going to do a slightly different format from what you might see on the BBC every Thursday night. We have 3 questions. A question on environment, a question on education and employment, and a question on freedom, which we'll go through as the evening progresses. We have 4 students who are going to take a role in each of those 3 questions. So of course we've got Ethan, Katie, Elizabeth and Nathan taking on our first question. Then we have Cecilia, Eleanor, Emily and Adam taking on our second question. And then we have Kieran, Lydia and Adam taking on our third question. So we're going to start straight away with the environment. And the question is fracking good for the UK? Is fracking good for the UK? So I'm going to start to my left-hand side. Would you like to make a point to open us up for the evening? No pressure.
Well, personally, I don't think it is, because I've looked into all the health risks in the pollution, in the damage it does to the environment and the structure of the earth, and it doesn't look good.
Can I bring in Charlotte first of all? I know you're
on the spot.
Straight on the spot to kick things off. Because obviously you've got a lot of experience in this area and a lot of backing behind this. Environmental scientist, it says here on my right hand side.
Yeah.
What are your opinions on fracking?
I think, well, in terms of experience in fracking, obviously it's relatively new in the UK. I think there is a lot of information out there, most of which is based on the experience which they've had in the US at the moment. I think it's very underregulated in the US. I think they've had some very poor experiences. There's a lot more regulation and legislation in the UK which would in a way change the way that any future fracking would be delivered. I think it's correct to raise queries regarding environmental impacts, whether that's water quality, traffic, disturbance, whatever that might be. I think it is correct to ask those questions, if nothing else, just so that they can be answered. I think it's very difficult to form an opinion at this point without having all of that information which is provided to a standard which is acceptable in the UK, because at the moment I don't believe there is a body of evidence out there which is suitable to address those queries in detail.
Elizabeth, you've got lots of notes there to the right hand side. Like to share your opinions?
In my opinion, I think fracking's there's countless benefits to fracking. It's going to create thousands of new jobs, which I think is very important for us especially in the northeast, because there's a 10% unemployment rate, and I think this Labour work would greatly improve our local economy, and also I think it can help make us as a nation more energy independent, rather than having to rely on places such as the Middle East for energy. So I just think as a whole it's quite a good thing.
Quite a good thing. Would you agree, Callum?
Yeah, I completely agree, but to an extent. I think fracking is one of those issues where you really have to debate it before implementing a full scheme, and the government has to look at both the cons and the pros and arguments for both sides. The US is a prime example of this, where we can learn from their failures and implement legislation to protect the people from those failures happening again. Now there's 3 key examples of where this fails in the United States. The first is the exceptions to the Safe Drinking Water Act, where there's exceptions to allow toxic chemicals being administered in the fracking process. Now the second is the Clean Water Act, where waste can go temporarily untreated, which is dangerous for people in the environment, not just the workers. And the third way is what Charlotte touched on, is they don't declare the chemical contents, and they're known as trade secrets, which may be good for business but are not good for the people. And as residents of local communities, that must be our key priority. Now there's many pros to the fracking process, which I'm much in favour of. Now UK's shale gas resources are reported to be 50% larger than conventional gas resources. Now this could bring jobs, growth and prosperity to our economy, which now of all times is what we need.
Thanks. So just remember, as you might have seen on the question time, it is an interactive forum, so if you want to bring up any points throughout, that any of our panellists are saying, just stick your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you and you'll be able to have your point. Okay, because I know you all look desperate to argue on this point, so make sure that you do on that one. I'm going to come to Nathan next. Anything you want to add that hasn't already been said on the subject?
No, I just, like, I'm kind of in between on it. I realise that jobs are very important because there's a lack of them at the moment in the economy. But the chemicals are incredibly dangerous, and through taking chemistry, I know how dangerous a lot of these chemicals are, like naphthalene and methanol and hydrogen fluoride, which are all carcinogens. And, well, no one likes cancer, I can say that. But they're also like highly toxic at just like minimal levels, like even an ounce. So that we don't want that in our drinking water.
So it's dangerous. I'm going to bring Owen into this now. Do you think that fracking is dangerous to people who live near it?
Well, I think you have to say that what's against fracking is risk. And I think there are two risks attached to it. There's the environmental risk, which we've already touched upon, which is things like the water table and the actual processes. There's also, I think, political risk attached to it. Because although I am going to say to you, I do think it is and will be a good thing for the UK, there's no doubt it will split people, and there'll be no bigger split than if the fracking is to take place near you. Because that is the reality of the politics of fracking. So I would say those two risks, but at the end of the day, for me, there are three reasons why I will back it. The first is that we are an economy in transition from a carbon economy, I hope, to a renewable economy, but we're not there yet. And in the meantime, we rely very heavily on oil and gas, and our energy security is very insecure. We import so much of it. You only have to watch the news at the moment to see what's happening in Ukraine and Russia to know how much we are at risk. So indigenous fuel energies have got to be useful to us. I see it as a sort of bridging thing that will see us between where we are now and I hope the greener, cleaner future that we're moving to, and which this area specialises in terms of renewable energy. So it's a kind of yes, but not a blind yes.
I'll bring Ian in next. Something sort of that resonated with Owen there was, is it a case of yes, as long as it's not in my backyard sort of approach to things, or is it not as clear cut as that?
Well, I think what you've got to look at, that isn't anybody touched on this about fracking, is why are you fracking? And you're fracking for shale gas. What is shale gas? Where is the shale gas? Fracking will benefit who? The communities? Will it mean that energy prices will be cheaper? It'll not. Will it mean that it'll fulfill the requirements of the nation in terms of what we need to generate? Because the fact is we're going to need more electricity for years to come. That's not the case. The only people that will benefit from fracking will be the energy companies. And they, like conventional gas, like what we've seen in the past, the big six and other companies will make fortunes from the consumer. One question I would like to ask back, by the way, Jonny, is we appear to have some experts on the panel about shale gas. Shale gas is a fossil fuel. We've just heard that potentially it's greener. Shale gas isn't green. Shale gas is dirtier than conventional gas. That's the reality of it. So when you hear the politicians on the television suggesting that shale gas is this fantastic, it's the panacea of the future, it isn't.
Can I try
and it's a fact. And if anybody wants to contest us on that, the fact of the matter is that shale gas and fracking, if we want fracking, at this moment in time, the government have given tax breaks and said local authorities may be able to basically get finances from the government. It shouldn't be up to local authorities, because local authorities at this point in time are suffering greatly as a result of austerity measures, and any way they can get finance, they would get it. And we should let the people who live in the communities, who live where there might be areas of fracking, let them decide. And if they say no to fracking, it should be no to fracking. Big business will benefit greatly from this, and the consumer will not. That's the difference.
Oh, and I haven't forgotten about you, Ethan. I'll come to you in a second. I think Nathan wanted to challenge you on one of those points.
No, I wasn't going to challenge, going to support him because sorry to be. But shale gas is known to increase radioactive purity in a lot of elements brought up in the shale, like radium, thorium, uranium. Like I just said uranium, sorry. But you're like, radioactivity is something we don't want because, well, it's not safe for life.
I will bring in Ethan now because you're the only one that has yet to have your say. You're sitting on your hands, ready to speak. Do you think it's a danger? Do you agree with Ian and Nathan?
I don't agree. I think fracking's come at a brilliant time. We're running out of gas in the conventional way from the North Sea. I think we need to explore other options. It is a greener fossil fuel than all the rest, and I see it as a transition to more renewable energy sources. We need to give them a time to develop and become more efficient and effective, and until that time we're going to have to, settle with the next best thing, which is shale gas.
Mr. Lavery asked a good question there, which was who would benefit from the use of fracking instrumentally if it was introduced. Now he answered the big companies, but I'm going to put this to you and say, what about the unemployed? The jobs it'll create for the growth of the private sector, the increase in exports, and how it will benefit the average person who's currently taking benefits from the state but could do so much better for themselves and their family if fracking was introduced.
The debate's starting, go on, Ian.
That's absolutely fine. I'll put another question back to you. How many jobs will fracking provide in this community? And I'll tell you, very, very, very few. If indeed it's successful, and then we embark upon trying to get as much shale gas as we possibly can, then I would totally support. I'm not opposed to fracking. I'm just putting the alternative view to it. Listen, let me tell you, every single job in this community would be welcome. So it isn't a case of me saying any different to that. But do not overestimate or underestimate how many jobs fracking itself will provide, because it's marginal, it's negligible, there's very, very few, unless you've got some figures to prove.
I'd just like to pick you up on that, yeah. The British Geological Survey estimates that the UK shale gas resources may be 50% larger than conventional gas resources. Now this, as an industry, 50%, potentially 50% larger than the current industry. And you're saying there's no jobs there? I have to disagree.
Well, listen, let me just put you right. I didn't say there wasn't any jobs there.
Well, you did.
Well,
You did.
I didn't say there's any jobs. I said there's very few jobs in fracking. And there's a difference between fracking and extracting shale gas.
Actually,
There's a huge difference. But again, what's the difference between the reserves, the estimated reserves, and the estimated resources of shale gas?
Well, I didn't say the estimated resources.
I know you didn't. I'm asking you a question. I'm asking you a simple question. What's the difference?
Many entrepreneurs that
What's the difference between the difference in the figures you've got? Because it'll be interesting to hear what you've got to say on that, because they might be the same as mine. What's the estimated reserves of shale gas compared to the resources of shale gas?
Why don't you tell them what figures you've got? And then
Yeah, tell me what figures you've got. Well, the British Geological Survey, as I've said.
Sorry, I didn't realise you were chairing it.
I'm just asking a question.
Well, she's more experienced.
She's from the same side as you see.
No,
just for the record, there's three conservatives on the panel here tonight, so don't be surprised if they gang up on the one Labour member, right?
I'm entirely sure
I'm
what
happy with that,
politics
Right, we'll stop it on the panel for a second. I'm getting it right into this now. I love it. Well, there's a couple of hands on the floor, so we'll go to the floor, and we'll start with Adam first. Adam, because there's two Adams.
So we're talking about jobs, but presumably for something like fracking, there will be quite specialist jobs that will require either people who are already trained in these jobs or people who require quite extensive training. So for the average unemployed person in the UK, is it really going to make that much of a difference unless we get this extensive training?
I think it's going to create a lot of labour-based jobs, which I think, especially in the northeast, especially as the mining industries declined, I think we need a lot more labour jobs. Like in America, it's created almost 1 million jobs like from this fracking industry. And I think in the next 10 years, if we introduce fracking, I think we could like make at least like 10,000 jobs out of it, like create that amount.
But isn't most of the sites in the northwest, not east?
Yeah, my understanding is that most of the geology of the northeast isn't well suited to fracking, but that's my understanding. It's not for me just about the northeast, and it's not just about the jobs in fracking. Energy security and the capacity to keep the factories of this country and the homes of this country running are, you know, jobs depend on that. Our lifestyle depends on it. I'm not sure whether it was suggested I said that shale gas was green. I wasn't suggesting that. I said we are moving towards an economy based on more renewables, and I just think we have to have secure long-term sources of energy, or our lifestyle as we know it is under threat. And fracking is a possible part of that we would rule out at great risk to ourselves.
Except for in the gas fields in the UK, in Lancashire, there's 8 wells which aren't fracking, but if you did fracking, you'd need hundreds of wells that would get the equivalent amount of gas out. And in one offshore gas field in the North Seas, you need thousands of wells to get that equal amount of gas. Not to mention, when you go off about it being that it means that we're not reliant on other countries, you're always going to be reliant on a country until you get a renewable resource, because otherwise it's going to run out, and then you're going to go, well, we've used up all our resources. You're going to then struggle to get the energy you need, because you didn't go for the, oh, let's invest in greener, let's just always defeat all the ones that are going to run out, because that's all we keep doing.
I do think that that's a fair comment. Perhaps the third risk I didn't mention is that actually, if we buy ourselves time, if we don't use that time wisely, we'll be no closer to the renewable energy that we need. And the risk is that you take your eye off the ball because you're using more fossil fuels, more carbon-based. So I accept what you're saying there. It is one of the risks. But I'm saying if you use it wisely, it buys us time.
Would you agree with that, Charlotte?
I would agree with that. I think that it's not a case of is it fracking and nothing else. I think really the important question is fracking suitable as part of, if you want, part of the energy mix to provide that gas supply, to provide us with an ongoing electricity supply. We have a huge issue in this country of energy security and provision of electricity. If we actually comply with all our EU restrictions, which are due to come up in 2016, we will actually have a huge reduction in our electricity production, and it will fall below what we need. The fact that the government has tried to be negotiating with various manufacturing companies to try and get them to run their factories and manufacturing plant at different times of the day, when your demand and my demand is lower, is a perfect example of that. And at the moment that's voluntary, but that will change. We absolutely need to get a good mix of energy production in this country, and if we don't start to look at options like fracking, nobody wants to see, I can imagine in this room, the countryside littered with wind turbines and solar parks, and I build them so I know, and believe me, people would rather not see them, but we can't simply rely on the existing power stations that we have, which are coal and are gas. I've got 4 coal-fired power stations as well. I'm not just saying we should just focus on fracking, but I think to dismiss something because it has risks is the wrong way to approach it. What we need to do is identify the risks, ask the right questions, and then decide whether or not it's right for the UK.
Can I just throw in a comment here, Charlotte?
Yeah,
I've got a broad concern for the country environment and ecologically. However, I'd rather not see the country laid waste by carcinogenics as well, or either.
Well, that's right, but it's got to be a mix, is my point.
Yeah, but from what I got from call you Owen, or what I got from Owen at the start of this conversation was that things will suffer badly ecologically and environmentally until we get to a better, greener energy. So I would lay waste to Callum's argument that shale is a much greener fuel. Which is it? Is it going to get worse with fracking, as Owen says, or is it not, according to Callum? And additionally to that, I would really like to know how many jobs fracking threatens? How many present jobs?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to the jobs question, but I can answer your ecology question, or partially answer it anyway. I think the answer is that anything that's going to produce electricity, energy, has an impact. If you look at wind farms, there are huge arguments that they have a very significant impact on ecology. Not on the environment in terms of pollution, obviously they're what's considered to be a green energy source, as are solar panels. But the fact of the matter is we cannot run the country just on renewable energy presently. So we're going to have
That's
to.
a fair enough point.
We're going to have to
but
have
I don't
that
see
mix.
the answer. I don't see the answer as laying waste around with toxins and carcinogenics.
Well, that's not possible.
No, it's all, you know. All right, you know, it's already been stated quite clearly that they're having problems in the US with this situation. And whether it's being regulated or not, it's apparently not being taken any notice of by the big industries that are making money from it.
Well,
so what guarantees could we have
The guarantees...
that any regulations are put in place before
well, the guarantees we could have is... Hold up, hold... You okay there? Well, the guarantees we could have is to hold Parliament to account, to ensure that they legislate efficiently, that acts are put through and bills are put through the Commons and the Lords, to ensure our safety, to ensure the safety of people working in that industry, and to ensure the three ways in which the US system of fracking is absolutely flawed does not reoccur in the United Kingdom, and that we have a proper process of fracking, and that it doesn't fall flat on its face like it has done in many other countries. We can learn from their mistakes, and because we've experienced their mistakes, we can put it right. And if I could quickly go back to the young gentleman's question at the back there when he spoke about there being a skills deficit, because I don't think anyone really got back to that properly. I do agree with you, there is a huge skills deficit in the UK market. We once had an education system back in the 80s and the 70s where there was a real vocational option, a vocational path in education where people could go to technology campuses, but that opportunity doesn't really exist. It's all focused on academia. Everyone expects their sons and daughters to become doctors, lawyers, nurses, the academic route. That should not be the case. There should be freedom for the vocational options, which should be preparing for a workforce of the future, a private sector that can lead the global race in the economics. That's what we need. More people in construction, more people in engineering, and we need to change the stereotype in education, change the stigma, so vocational options are real options.
We're running out of time on this question, so final point with Ian.
Can I just say that, you know, fracking, we've got to proceed with it because we are on a demonstration basis, because we need energy in this country and we're fast running out of energy. The problem is we need to answer the questions, so in order to answer the questions we need some demonstration plants. The issue is that there's too many facts and figures thrown in either for or against it. We need to get on with it and see what we can do. It's got to be regulated, but it's got to be done in communities where people accept it. One thing, the gas, coal, I think it was Owen mentioned before that we're very reliant on oil and gas. Actually, as we sit here in the UK, coal is producing between 40 and 50% of the electricity we use, and that's a fact. And we cannot continue to burn coal unabated, and we cannot burn shale gas unabated. So what we need for the future, there's no doubt about it, is carbon capture and storage. So we can use our indigenous reserves, whether it be coal, whether it be shale gas, whether it be conventional gas, so we can meet our EU objectives in terms of emission levels come 2030 and come 2050. And that's a great, honestly, it's something which we could talk about all night.
It really is something we could talk about all night.
The need to make sure that as a country we take our responsibility head on with regard to emission levels. Carbon capture and storage would ensure that we could basically self-reliant on what I just mentioned. Very important issue of carbon capture and storage.
But carbon's not ever kept in one place.
We're going to be there all
always gets back into the
and
atmosphere.
if we're talking about environmental impacts and we're moving on to carbon capture and storage, and that's an entirely different panel.
The two ways that I know of carbon capture is storing them in carbonates, which is storing them in a metal, and storing them underground in massive voids, like space. And both of those ways, the CO2's got to come back out some way, because it'll drift through the rock.
Again, it's got to be done under regulation. It's got to be demonstrated that it can be done safely. And at this point in time, it's doing it in different parts of the world. If they can do it in Canada at the Boundary Dam, and I've been to see that, by the way, then we can do it here in the UK. But another thing, you know, one thing that really upset me was when somebody in the House of Lords at a Tory peer said, why do we not just do the fracking up in the desolate north? What an insult to the people in this area. An absolute disgrace. Maybe some people might wish to comment on that.
You know, right, we could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. We're running out of time. Final point with Katie.
Just to touch on the health and health risks. In America, where they've been doing it, it's not just America, like in Canada and Australia, since fracking's came about, areas around there's been clusters of cancer, there's been respirational problems, there's been reproductive problems and neurological problems, and that wasn't there until fracking came around. And the other point is the fact that the amount of radioactivity in the water, and this is when they've gone and tested a load of sites which normally aren't regulated by America, because the ones in America where they regulate them, they're actually fine. But the ones which haven't been, and then they've gone and tested them, and this is when the EPA tested, the levels of radioactivity in the water was that high that it was unsafe to treat it. So I don't see why we should risk fresh water that we need to drink to live on, because we think, oh yeah, let's go for another non-renewable source that may harm the environment, but as long as we've got power.
But studies have shown that only 42 documented instances of such water problems that have tens of thousands of wells that are drilled have had these sort of problems. So I think you're only looking at the negative sides.
You do realise that the companies, whenever they go to court on these matters, make people sign disclaimers.
I don't think that was a fracking problem, that was more that the pipes weren't being reinforced than just the fracking problem. So I think if we address that matter, I don't think you should disband fracking as a whole just because of that. Just make the pipes that are transporting
I looked up on the flow-outs they have in the communication, or even the fact of the
We'll leave it there. We could go on and on and on. And I don't want to sit here any longer than I have to because our illustrious host has arrived. So we're going to take a really, really quick break while we switch with a couple of the students. So we can have a round of applause for the students.